Hello and welcome to Today I Learned with the Inner Link, or TIL with TIL. So I'm Joshua, a trainee counselor at the Inner Link.
I'm Ayleah, and also a trainee counselor from the Inner Link.
And thank you for tuning in today. So today, what are we going to be talking about?
Well, today's episode of TIL with TIL, we are going to be looking at what are boundaries?
What are boundaries?
That's such a good question. And I think when we're talking about boundaries, right, I feel like it's a topic that's just been coming up these days, and we've been doing this for our lives as well. It seems like people are thinking about what boundaries are. And I think just to get into the idea of boundaries, right, I've always been hearing, at least in the past few years, I want to set boundaries in my relationships, with my family, at the workplace. And I'm like, okay. And these days you're hearing more about where they want to put these boundaries. Physical boundaries, sexual boundaries, time boundaries, emotional boundaries. There are just so many. So I think this is a great opportunity to break it down. But what are you thinking about?
I think, like I said, when you ask what are boundaries, it also helps to ask why are we talking about it.
Right.
I think, like as you said, a lot of people do want to know more about boundaries, but they also maybe don't really fully understand what boundaries are.
Okay.
So for some people, they're like, okay, yes, let's draw more boundaries. But some people are like, I like being a people person. I don't like maybe restricting myself or like holding back from giving to people. So they see something it's something that's like restricting.
Right, like a negative thing.
Like a negative thing.
Yeah.
So I guess if you were to define boundaries in a maybe neutral way,
okay,
how would you define boundaries?
When I think of boundaries, I imagine a door.
Ooh, right? Okay.
Because a lot of the time when we define boundaries, we think, okay, this is a line that you cannot cross because this is my boundary. But boundaries, while some may be non-negotiable, there are also those boundaries that are flexible because they can be open to certain people and they can be close to other people too. So I imagine that, say, my boundary is I cannot stand it when people are shouting at me, let's say, So I would appreciate it that you respect that when you're speaking with me to speak in a respectful tone, right? So maybe my boundaries, these are close to people I am not close to and people who I'm not comfortable being around with. But let's say the person who I'm really close to, right? Let's say my partner raises his voice and it's not because he wants to pick an argument with me, but it's because he wants to share his opinion, let's say. Okay, so that's where my boundary is flexible. Okay, I'm going to allow you to raise your voice, but I'm also going to impose at the same time, okay, this is a space for you to express your emotions. But at the same time, I also want to say, hey, I understand you want to express it, but I always appreciate it when you use that respectful tone with me.
So kind of keeping that door just a little ajar.
Yeah, okay, that's a better word, like a little ajar. So it's still there, but it's like a door.
I really like the analogy of like doors. I'm imagining in the mind a palace of doors.
Right? They're just like all there, like different floors for
different floors,
different doors, different
Some of those
colors.
doors are wide open.
Right.
Because you're like, yeah, sure, this is fine. You're welcome to maybe like text me at any time.
Yeah.
For example. So another door might be like firmly shut, like, oh, hey, maybe you can't call me a certain word. So I imagine like these doors, some of them partially ajar, some of them closed, some of them fully open, some of them closed only to certain people.
That's true.
Some of them open only to certain people.
Yep. Oh. And how about you? Because that's just, like my imagination. But
I feel like stealing yours. But I guess I would go with the textbook definition of boundaries.
Sure. I think we should totally hear that.
Yeah, because I think that's easier for me to understand. Like I read somewhere, boundaries are the limits that define where you end and the other person begins.
Oh.
So I found it very interesting.
Okay.
Like where do you end? Where does the other person begin? Okay. What separates the two of us? Right. And because I always see boundaries as maybe something that is like walls. or like I used to see it as walls, but after hearing the definition, I guess I see it more as spaces, gaps, like what separates me from other people, what maybe am I in control of or responsible for, what are other people in control of and responsible for, what makes me me, what do I like, what do I want, what are my goals for myself, what are other people's maybe goals for themselves, and maybe what we want from each other. That could differ. So when you have boundaries, and maybe I want you to, maybe if we are friends, I want us to hang out maybe once a week. But as a friend, you might want to hang out once in 2 weeks. Right?
Yeah.
So in those cases, then the boundary, the space between us stops either you from accepting my requests.
And you telling me, okay, I want to have
and me being like, I'm comfortable with that. But us negotiating, right? Coming to a sort of consensus about how we bridge that gap between us. So I don't know if that makes sense.
I think this is also explaining how we're drawing boundaries, and I'm hearing that it involves a lot of understanding who you are, what your goals are, what your needs are, but also understanding the other person's needs at the same time.
So, so when I see people negotiating boundaries, I see it as them building a bridge across those gaps, if that makes sense. Some people, their boundaries or those gaps aren't very well guarded. So then there's like bridges everywhere. Everyone can cross over those boundaries anytime they want. Some people are a lot more maybe vigilant. Like maybe there's like these walls are up. So nobody can like get through sometimes those boundaries. Even when like someone who struggles to reach out to people, someone who doesn't like socializing. Like I could see them as having like high boundaries when it comes to talking to people. But the problem is sometimes they need support. They need to talk to people. But those walls are up so high that they cannot maybe sometimes push through those boundaries when they need to. So that's why I see it as like a
bridge.
Like a bridge. Yeah, like a bridge or just a boundary, I guess, a gap.
When you were mentioning the bridges and how you were saying maybe the walls are up, I was also imagining at the same time there must be some bridges that are really like arced, there are some that are just like straight, like hard to get over, some that are just straight, like okay, this is it, and some that maybe like, I don't know, have several, like,
or like a little rickety,
or a little rickety,
easily destroyed.
That one's interesting. Okay. Since you were talking about like, how some are not well guarded, some are rickety. And then on my side, we were also talking about how some doors are just like super wide open. Some are just like slightly ajar. I think we're also talking about, why we and why people are struggling with boundaries.
Yeah, I guess that does bring us to the question of like, why draw boundaries?
Or why draw boundaries?
Draw boundaries? Yeah. So I think before we understand maybe why people find it difficult or easy to draw boundaries, so why do you draw boundaries?
Why do I draw boundaries? Well, this is such a simple answer because I need them. Well, if I didn't draw my boundaries or those bridges or those doors with the people around me, with my family members, with my partner, with my friends, with my colleagues, I think I would lose a big part of who I really am. Remember, we were talking about that understanding of the self and understanding of others, right? I think when I draw those boundaries, it kind of gives me room to think about, okay, what do I want? Like you said, what do I need? What are my goals? Who do I want to be as a person, right? I want to be someone who is kind. Where do I draw those boundaries where it is kind versus being taken advantage of, or I want to be someone who is constantly learning, right? So am I going to pursue that? Am I going to be held back by the people who are saying, okay, this is what you should be doing instead with your life, So I think in a very simple way, it's what I need, and it also helps me become who I am.
I like the idea of boundaries preventing you from losing yourself.
Right, that's the word.
Like kind of keeping your identity distinct from other people. I guess I'd say the same for me. It is also, I guess, helps me not lose myself. And it's not just maybe like my identity, who I am, the things I want, the things I need, but also I guess my energy.
Your energy?
My energy, my mental well-being. I feel like I have this well of water, of resources that I can give out to people sometimes, or sometimes I need to draw in for myself. So if maybe I don't have boundaries, then I guess I see people constantly drawing from that well, taking more than they pour in.
Taking more than they are pouring in.
Yeah, so kind of like a mutual give and take. Some people will take more than they can give back. Some people give more than I can sometimes give back. So I guess being aware of my boundaries makes sure that I'm not losing all of myself to other people. Or sometimes even not doing the same to other people, like taking more than they can give. So kind of when I feel like I respect my boundaries, it's easier for me to respect other people's boundaries. Or help them respect their boundaries. Right. So then we're kind of taking care of each other's wells. So to say. So I see it as also like, rather than not just losing identity, but also losing the energy I have to do the things I need to do, the capacity I have to take care of myself, to meet my goals, do the things that make me feel fulfilled. So I guess that's why I would draw boundaries, is to protect myself.
Protection.
Yeah, from like running on empty. Yeah, because like you said, we do have our own values, wanting to be kind, wanting to be empathetic, wanting to be helpful, good human beings, in quotes. In quotes, but I guess when you're running on empty, it's really hard to do the things that make you. Right? Sometimes in the past, I would say I saw boundaries as something bad, because I was like, I want to be a good person. I want to give to people. I want to be there for people. I want to help anyone who's in need. That was my value. But I realized that when I'm running on empty, it's really hard to do that, because I start resenting people. Then I'm doing the things I want to do begrudgingly. It's like, not again. Or this person again. Then I realized the way I could do that sustainably, actually do the things I value, is maybe by drawing boundaries, having some checks in place to make sure
that's a good one. Yeah.
I'm not drawing on empty, that also other people can learn to help themselves. Giving them also a bit more autonomy, recognizing that they are also responsible for the things that they're going through. So maybe not enabling them to keep
taking, right? Pulling out the water from that well every time. And I love that you mentioned the well analogy, the well of all your resources. And every time it gets depleted, your energy, your mental well-being, your time, your kindness, all of that, and you're also telling us like what's going to happen the moment that well runs empty, and you've had that experience. There is resentment, there is that energy that is drained, and the whole purpose of trying to help other people just is not fulfilled if you are exhausted. Right? And you're also saying, when that happens, what about the other people also? How are they going to continue those relationships with you if you are running on dry and they are constantly taking from you?
Then they resent me.
Then they resent you. See, like we're looking at what's
mutual resentment all around.
So I'm really hearing why these boundaries are important.
So also I'm kind of curious about what happens when your boundaries are crossed too often.
Wow, that's a good question. When they are crossed too often, I think that is when I feel like I am losing my sense of control. Right? Because even though we can negotiate these boundaries, right? A lot of it also is focused on what I can control, right? And what I know I cannot control as well. And these kind of boundaries, in some sense, are things I can control because I can still communicate my wants and needs. But if I decide to let those boundaries be crossed and say, Josh wants to hang out, every week, I'm going to do exactly that. Even though my boundary is, I need space on my off days to just process my emotions, to just reconnect with myself. And I decide, every week I'm going to see Josh. Well, it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? To meet up with your friend, hang out every week. At the same time, I may be losing the only time I use for myself, reconnecting with myself, processing my emotions. If I do less of that too, then every week is just gonna go by hey, what's going on? I'm feeling irritable. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling sad from time to time. And I realized at the end of the day, I'm not giving my space to process these emotions. And if I don't think about them anymore, then maybe I'm going to lose some sense of the control I have over my life. All of a sudden, things are like going to be going haywire. I don't understand what's going on. And then when I come to see you, I'm going to bring all this negative energy when we see each other. And it's not going to be enjoyable anymore. You know?
It's kind of funny that you say losing control, and this is the example you give. That's what's been happening recently to me. Yeah, because I feel like I've
struck a chord
to a lot
there.
of things.
Okay.
Yeah, recently, and I've been exhausted as a result of it, like burnt out. Like there are a lot of things I enjoy doing. Like I enjoy working. I enjoy like talking to people. I enjoy meeting up. I like planning things. But in the last 2 weeks, I feel like because I've said yes to everything or a lot of things, every day has been packed. Every day I've had something going on. And when you said then not having that time to recharge, I was like, oh, that's exactly what's been happening to me recently. So yesterday I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna sit down, just gonna peace out.
Right.
So I just napped. I haven't napped in forever. I love naps.
I know you need them.
Yeah, I need them.
Yeah.
It makes such a big difference. And I was like, wow, just that small act of taking back that control.
Right.
Because instead of napping, I was kind of also thinking, maybe I should check up on this person, follow up on that person, maybe I know someone's going through a bit of a crisis. Let me check in on her.
Right.
And then I was like, you know what? I don't have the energy for this. I need to relax a little now. Take a bit of a rest. And you're right. When you don't do that, like consciously checking in on your boundaries, it does become like, it does feel like you're losing control of things. Like people are taking from you.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
More than you can handle. And I was like, I'm going to like, I don't know if it's going to explode, maybe like implode.
Okay,
implode. Like zone out for a whole day and be like, okay, what is happening?
Right.
So I think, when you said that, I was like, I can see it happening also in life. And how it's important to make sure that, I also respect my own boundaries.
Yes, the self-boundaries too, there's also that. So important.
Yeah, because I think what you said also comes back to, a lot of times when we talk about boundaries, we can want other people to respect our boundaries. We can have boundaries with other people. But what about boundaries with the self? Are we taking care of ourselves? Are we respecting ourselves? Are we saying no to ourselves when we want things that are not sustainable?
Right. I like that the word you use is like sustainable. And I think that's one of the key things to think about when you are drawing those boundaries, right? How it is helping you, if it's healthy for you in any way, or if you decide to keep drawing these boundaries, what are the negative effects of that or the positive outcomes? It's good to weigh the pros and cons, in order to see where you stand.
Yes. So what do you think about coming back to boundaries with the self? What do you feel like are maybe some things people can struggle to do when drawing boundaries? Maybe we could start with just boundaries with the self.
I think personally for me, I think that's the one that people struggle with the most when it comes to setting it. That is boundaries with the self. Because if you're setting boundaries with other people, it's very easy to say, because I don't want to hurt this person or because I don't want to be hurt, that is why I want to be able to set these boundaries with these important people in my life. But when it comes to the self, that's when it's a little bit of a gray area, right? Because how many of us tend to come to the point where we decide, okay, it's time for me to take care of myself.
Yeah.
Right? And we know that when we come in therapy, people are coming here to take care of themselves. A lot of the times it's because they just haven't been doing that for themselves.
Yes.
Right? And maybe one of the things that cause people to struggle with these self-boundaries is because they were never taught how to do that.
Yes.
That's probably one. And also because, and this is just, an idea, because they tend to think that it's not as important as the relationships they have with other people. So as in the relationships they have with other people is more important than the relationship they have with themselves.
Themselves.
Yeah. So one, if and this is pretty common, right? In Asian culture where we are so collectivistic, right? We tend to think, okay, family is more important, right? Above all those like arguments, above all those disputes that are happening. In the end, family is the most important thing.
Yeah, spot on.
Right? So that makes it difficult when you want to say no to your family, when you want to say, I want to just have this time to go out with my friends, right? So we are not taught how to say, okay, mom and dad want to have an outing today, right? We're not really taught to say, hey, mom, dad, I want to just rest at home today. We aren't really taught that. We're kind of taught to say yes to everything.
Yeah, I mean, whether we like it or not, we have to.
Say yes. And what about the self-boundaries? Who just, we just want to rest at home or we want to do something else. And essentially, that's not wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can spend time with your family and still spend time with yourself.
Yes.
That's one.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. It starts when you're young. I think at home, that's when you're taught how to draw boundaries. That's when you learn how to respect your boundaries and other people's boundaries. And when you see people not respecting your boundaries, a la your parents usually, then I guess it's easier for you to also then be like, oh, hey, my boundaries are not important to my parents, so I guess they shouldn't be important to me as well.
So this is the case.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
So then you just grow up always being told that, when you want to do something for yourself, you're being selfish. They're like, what about us? What about the family?
Oh, yeah.
What about other people?
You're being selfish.
You're being selfish, you're being lazy.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of these words that are used to shame us, I guess, when we're growing up, learning how to assert ourselves, the things we want to do. And I guess at a younger age, it's hard to say no, because you don't have the autonomy, you don't have the agency as a child to assert yourself, because who are you? You are like a dependent, right? Your parents get to decide major life events.
Exactly.
They have a lot of control. And a lot of times parents don't realize they have that much power, that much control to determine a child's entire personality, identity, the ways in which they think about themselves. So they teach the child that wanting things for yourself is bad.
Right.
You should want what I want.
Okay.
If you don't want what I want, something's wrong with you.
I think I want to add, we know what's best for you.
We know what's best for you. Ooh. Heard that too many times. And then the child is like, okay, then I can't trust myself. Or if I want things for myself, I'm wrong.
Okay.
Or there's something I'm missing. Or I'm selfish. Yeah. So there's a lot of gaslighting involved. And I guess when you're younger, to some extent, that could be true. Right? To some extent, as a child, you might not always know what's best for you. Like children are running into traffic all the time. Or maybe sticking their fingers into sockets. Some children, I mean, we can be very self-destructive. But as we get older, when parents don't adjust to our growing autonomy, our growing independence, they don't start to treat us or give us more space to take risks, to make decisions, to start saying no to things, then it's easier for us also to get used to being told what to do by other people, having other people determine our boundaries. So then when we grow up, we have friendships, we have relationships, we're like, whatever you want, I want. That's how we learn to earn love, earn admiration, keep harmony, all of these things. Yeah.
I do agree with that. If you do not but if you do not learn how to manage these self-boundaries, you tend to carry it forward into your relationships later. So it's not just in the family anymore. It's also with your next important person, your next significant other, your next friend, your next person you meet at work. Like you said, you're going to be asking, okay, what do you want? I'll be there for you. Yeah. Anything you say.
Anything you say. Yeah. And I guess that struggle becomes all too real. I think when you're in a relationship with someone who also doesn't have the same level of or who has a similar level of not respecting their own boundaries.
That's the one. Yeah.
Two people not respecting their own boundaries can get very enmeshed, very codependent.
Right.
And then the cycle continues. Because then you're both enabling each other not to respect your own boundaries. Imagine being that's why sometimes a lot of relationships can fall apart.
I think about that for a bit. And I think since we're on the negative side of what's going to happen if you lose those self-boundaries or boundaries in general, right? I think it's also important to bring up, why these things happen at first. Why people are saying, I know what's best for you, let's say your parents, or why they think they are the ones who have to teach you, right?
What's your hypothesis?
Well, we know that there is good intention. And we also know that we follow those because that's the only way we know how to keep those relationships. So if that is the same logic, these people have good intentions for me, and following them is what I can do to keep those relationships. If we carry these thoughts forward, then people will respond in a thought like, okay, I'm going to listen to what they have to say because this is how I maintain my relationships with all these other people. Because that's all we know. Because that's all we know.
Ooh, okay, right? Okay. Coming back to that.
Right.
I'm only lovable. I'm only worth something if I'm making other people happy.
Exactly.
The only reason people want to be with me is because I make them happy. I think that's a very CBT perspective.
But it does come to that, right? If you're, even without the CBT perspective there, I'm only lovable when I am respecting what everyone else wants. Yes. When I listen to them. This is how I know I'm worthy. That's such a good word.
Worthy.
Oh my goodness, that's such a good word.
Yeah. So then if you're not pleasing people, if you're saying no to people, if you're drawing boundaries with people, suddenly you're like, oh, my relationships are going to fall apart. People are going to hate me. People are going to abandon me because I'm no longer giving them what they want. What reason do they have to be with me? What reason do they have to be around me?
Yep.
Right? If I'm not exposing my boundaries for them to cross at any time.
Yes.
Ooh, okay. So I got a little confused here because I thought you meant why do parents sometimes think they know best? So I was thinking also the cycle is repeating there. It's like intergenerational trauma because they've grown up like being taught that, the parent has to direct the child in everything. The parent has to control everything, right? To make sure that, the parent has to determine their child's boundaries to make sure the child is safe. And so as children, they probably also have to surrender to their parents.
So it's like, it's happened then, it's happening again.
So when they have kids, they're like, okay, this is how I was raised, this is how I raise my children as well. So there's that unwillingness to let go of boundaries. To let go of control. There's that unwillingness to understand their own boundaries. So that comes in later as well. That transfers down the generations of like, I don't know my own boundaries, so I don't know your boundaries, right? I was an extension of my parents. My parents saw me as an
so we'll just keep going.
Now you are an extension of me.
Okay.
You have no identity outside of me. So then they don't see that separation that, I'm a parent, you are a child, we are different people. But rather, as my child, that possessiveness comes in. My child. You are like me. You are similar to me. You want the things that I want. If you don't, something's wrong with you. If you don't, I am threatened. My identity is threatened because my identity depends on you being like me.
That's so crazy.
So I guess a lot of times then people who have codependent relationships find it hard to understand why their partners, why their friends are different from them or do things differently from them or want things differently from them because to them, their identity, the other person's identity are the same because there's no boundaries. And like you said, you lose yourself, you lose your identity when you don't have boundaries. Because you start to see the other person and you as being like the same entity. And both of you, I'm close to this person, that means we want the same things. When they do something that hurts you or that upsets you or that goes against your values, it can be very jarring because you're like, okay, but I thought I was safe. I thought we were similar. Right?
Okay.
So without boundaries, safety comes from the other person being exactly like you. But with boundaries, safety comes from knowing who you are, knowing who the other person is, and being able to accept and respect that difference. So that, I guess, then there is true safety there.
Okay.
Otherwise,
true safety. That's
Otherwise, there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of insecurity that comes in.
I think that's a very good thing to bring up now, the accepting and respecting can also be difficult because, we can have that, right? But then when it comes to other people, it can be very difficult when we hear, we have to accept your boundaries like this. This is what I have to respect, even though I'm not comfortable with it, right? So what if we go a little bit in that direction? the accepting and the respecting of boundaries. Because this is like on how to draw these boundaries, right?
How to draw
these boundaries.
Okay, yeah, that would then entail, like, if you were to accept and respect someone's boundaries, how would other people accept and respect your own boundaries? No, it's more of like, how are you drawing boundaries that other people can accept and respect?
Okay, that's a good one. No?
Because,
you're saying no?
I mean, if you can draw boundaries, people are not going to accept and respect it. So, well, how do you draw boundaries regardless of whether other people accept it or respect it?
Okay.
Yes.
That's a good one.
That's
a good
That's what
one.
we're going for.
Well, that's so interesting because when I do try to draw boundaries, I think I still try to, communicate it in a way that will likely be accepted and will likely be respected. You caught me there. Because I think if I were to hear it from the next person, I would think, okay, when I communicate boundaries, or when this other person, communicates boundaries to me, I want to be able to deliver it in a way that can be listened to, and gives room for conversation.
Yes.
So I'm not just saying, okay, I'm not going to hang out with you every week now, Josh. And then that's it, I walk away. It's going to be like, you're not giving me room to explain myself. You're not giving me room to talk about it with you.
Yeah, and I'd like to jump in and point out that when people do that, it's because they see the only alternative to maybe not being similar to someone is being completely detached from the person. So they join that boundary, they're like, okay, I don't ever want to talk to you again. But not recognizing there's an in-between phase. It's not like you and the person have to agree on everything, you have no relationship. It's creating room for disagreement and agreement for both. Recognizing that both can be healthy.
So you can negotiate that.
Yeah. Because some people can see it as either or. Either you make me feel completely safe, we're exactly like each other, or I want nothing to do with you. Because then it's so scary being with someone who has the potential to disagree with you, to hurt you. Right? But the more, I guess, for me, the more I get comfortable drawing boundaries, the more comfortable I am disagreeing with people, knowing that it doesn't mean that, this person's unsafe for me, this person's going to hurt me, or this person is a terrible person just because they're different from me. It's me being able to come to terms and recognize that, oh, this person is different from me. And then it starts, I guess, with, as you said, drawing those boundaries, opening it up for conversation, opening it up for two different perspectives, right? Opening it up for understanding, so that when you have those boundaries set in place, two people can come together and talk to each other and be like, okay, why? Why not? Why do you want me to do this? Why do you not want me to do this? Why do I want to do this? Where am I coming from? Where are you coming from? Then there's more understanding there. Then there's more room to separate yourselves without having to completely separate. Just stop talking altogether.
And isn't that a great thing? I'm seeing that the disagreement can be good. I'm seeing it gives room for understanding, like you say, and conversation. And doesn't that just lead to a better relationship with that person?
Yes, ideally. There are people who respond very badly to boundaries.
That is also true. Yeah. So what do we do about those then?
I do want to come back to that after a bit, because I do want to also expand on what you said about how do you draw boundaries. And when you said, you've called me out when you said you do want to draw them in a way that other people are more likely to accept and respect them. So again, still knowing people might respond very badly to them. But I think there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with wanting to draw boundaries in a way people will accept and respect. Saying it in the best way possible. So I think the things you said are opening it up for conversation. I think I agree with that. Some things I like to do are just talking about my feelings. Oh, hey, I felt a little upset that you called me after midnight repeatedly, right after I had gone to sleep. And I was really tired, and I would have really loved it if I hadn't picked up the first time, you would have called me the next morning instead.
I see.
Right. So maybe talking about my feelings, and then telling the other person what I need. And then also saying, I am sorry that maybe if you went to an emergency, I wasn't there for you. What would you like me to do next time? Or what do you think would work next time? So maybe asking the other person what they think, seeing what would work for them. But also, expressing my feelings.
Yeah.
So I guess sometimes the ways in which we say things can be abrasive. It's like, oh, hey,
That's true.
you called me 4 times last night. Don't you care about my sleep?
Oh, that's gonna like just start an argument. What do you mean I don't care about your sleep?
Yeah.
I do. I just needed you.
Exactly.
There we go.
So then that attacking can create more, I guess, problems than it's worth.
More tension, more conflict, right?
Yeah. Or like, oh, you're so selfish for like calling people, like, do you have no respect for people's boundaries? Saying stuff like that can be very damaging. But even if I say it really nicely, like, oh, hey, I noticed you called me a few times last night. I was asleep, so usually I don't pick up calls after midnight. Do you mind if I ask what was happening yesterday? Then suddenly it's more understanding, empathetic. So rather than me coming with that anger of like, you crossed my boundary, I'm like, oh, hey, you crossed a boundary. What was happening?
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm picking up just a few things that we can use. Being empathetic when we communicate our boundaries.
Yes.
Expressing our feelings. And I'm hearing when you're expressing your feelings, you're not making it about the other person. You're making it about what's going on with you, how you felt about it. So there's not really blame. It's more like how I felt because of your action. Not because you did this and I'm like...
Yeah, you did this to me. You made me feel sleepy.
That's not the case, right?
Yeah.
That's not the case.
Yeah.
So being empathetic in communicating our boundaries. What was that? Being empathetic.
I forgot.
We'll have to bring it back then. Being empathetic, being able to
make it about my feelings.
Make it about your feelings, right?
I think also then being assertive, saying I don't usually take calls after midnight.
Assertive is also
Yeah.
I still want to touch on that one. Because some people think when assertive means like asserting dominance or asserting like how you are right and the other person is wrong, when it's not what being assertive is about.
What is being assertive then?
I find that the assertive is like the nice balance in between passive and aggressive.
Yes.
Giving room for the other person to still say something.
Yes.
But also clarifying your point, communicating that. Communicating that.
And I guess clarifying, communicating is how I also define assertiveness. Like people think being assertive is being convincing.
Okay.
They think being assertive means if I've told you, oh hey, I don't like calls after midnight, the other person should agree that, okay, I'm now going to call you.
Yes.
But assertiveness doesn't mean the other person's going to be convinced. Assertiveness just means the other person knows my boundary and they decide what to do with it.
Knows, that's an important word.
So I guess assertiveness is communicating without controlling. That's how I define it.
I think that's a clear one, communicating without controlling. I think you mean controlling, like not controlling the other person.
Not controlling the other person, not controlling the outcome. Just letting the other person know, hey, this is my boundary. I would appreciate it if you didn't cross it, but without being like, better not cross it or else,
or else things gonna go down.
Or like, do you agree? Do you understand? Saying stuff like that.
And the person will have to say, either like, yes, I must, and then risk later like having attention or saying no, and it just goes up into a full blown argument.
Because I want them to say like, I want them to agree. And I guess we did not touch on what happens if the other person responds badly. But that's something maybe we could talk about
in our next few episodes.
So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. So this was Today I Learned with TIL, or TIL with TIL. And be sure to check out theinnerlink.com. That's the inner link with a Y.
Yes, link with a Y.
Link with a Y.
Inner with an I.
Inner with an I.
If you'd like to book a session with one of us, I'm a trainee counselor. Leah is also a trainee counselor, and we have several registered and licensed counselors and associates at the Innerlink, as well as clinical psychologists who offer a variety of mental health services, holistic wellness services. So feel free to check us out, book an appointment with us if you'd like, or follow up with us on our Instagram page if you have any questions about mental health or you'd like to know more about therapy.
Definitely. And we're talking about boundaries, right? I'm sure that's something you can talk about with your next professional support. But until we see each other next time, we will be signing off.
Yes. So thank you for joining us, and let us help you take care of your mental health and wellness.
See ya.
Ciao.